In today's ActiveCampaign Forms tutorial, we'll go over the advanced details of the form builder, how to add forms to your website or Facebook page, and how form data can be used in campaigns and automations so you can start collecting new leads and engaging with them right away. I want to quickly mention before we get started that if you already have an ActiveCampaign account, you can head to jumbojetpack.com/free to get our premium membership for free. More on that at the end of the video. Now, to start, we'll get to the Forms page by clicking Site and then Forms. If you're visiting this page for the first time, you may be presented with a button to create your first form. Otherwise, you can click Create a Form here. I'm going to create a form to allow people to request consultations to build off of my ActiveCampaign automation tutorial. If you're interested in learning how to build and customize advanced automations, I'll link to it in the description and add another card to this video. So, to start, I'll just name this form Consultation Requested. Now we have to pick our form style. Inline is the default and what you'll use most of the time. It's just a standard form that you can embed anywhere on your web pages. The rest of these are pretty self-explanatory, but to quickly go over them, this floating bar will either sit at the bottom or top of your web page and stay there even when the user scrolls down your page. You may have this float at the top of all your shop pages and say something like, enter your name and email to get 10% off your next order. They fill out the form and it triggers an automation where you send them a coupon code and they're on your list for whatever other emails you want to send, like product updates or abandoned cart emails. Floating box is simple because we have an example right here. This help form floats in the corner of the screen even on longer pages. Similarly, we're looking at an example of the modal right now. This create a form box has opened up on top of the rest of the page, and we can't interact with the things behind it unless we close this modal window. I'm just going to stick with inline form and move on to the actions. First things first, I'll always want to subscribe them to a list in case we're getting their information for the first time, so I'll select my main list here. If you created your ActiveCampaign account through Jumbo Jetpack, even if it's a free trial, we create your first contact list for you so you don't have to worry about it as part of our premium setup services. If you want to add them to another list as well, or add a particular tag to the contact when the form is submitted, you can click here to add another action. For now, I'm just going to click Create. Now we're in the form editor. You can edit these existing form elements by just clicking on them and then editing them in the sidebar. For example, I'll change this to Request a Consultation. You can move elements around by clicking and dragging here, or you can delete them. If we click on one of the input fields, like full name, you'll see a few more options in the sidebar. We could change this to something like your full name, but an important thing to remember is the fact that these fields are mapped to contact fields in ActiveCampaign already, so you can't edit these to ask something else. For instance, if I want to know the contact's phone number or even just their first name, I can't change this to phone number or first name. I need to delete this element and then add a new one by switching to standard here in the sidebar under fields and then dragging the fields I want to the positions I want them in. If I click on first name now, you'll see that we can edit the default text, which gets updated here, or I could delete it altogether. I can also set the field to required if I want to make sure they give me their name when they submit this form. If I want to ask a question that isn't standard, I have to add a custom field, or select an existing one we set up in the past here under My Fields. Let's say for this consultation, I want them to provide me with some details about the project they want me to work on for them. I'll click Add a Custom Field, set the field name to Project Details, I'll leave the group as is, and change the field type to text area. Though while we have this open, you can also take a look at some of the other options, such as date, drop-down, checkbox, and hidden field, which we'll come back to in a second. I'll select text area now to close this, and then click Add. Now we can scroll down here and drag our new custom field into the form. Because it's a text area rather than a text input, we can click here to expand the size of the text area as much as we want. I have one more thing I want to add to this form, but first I need to demonstrate an important and powerful functionality of ActiveCampaign's forms. If we go up here to integrate, and then grab the link to this form, we can open it up in a new tab and take a look at what we have so far. Now, there are varying times when you would want to do this, which we'll talk about more in a minute, but we actually have the ability to pre-fill this form for our contacts because each field is pre-mapped to URL variables. Now, don't worry if you don't know what any of that means because I'll demonstrate. We can fill in this email field when the page loads by telling the form what the email is up here in the URL with what are known as URL variables. At the end of the URL, we add a question mark, and this question mark tells the browser that everything before it is the link, and everything after it are the URL variables. Then we add the name of the variable, which in this case is email, and we set the value of the variable with an equal sign. The value is just the email address that we want to be added to this field automatically. So I'll type support@jumbojetpack.com. If we hit enter to load this page, we'll see that the email we enter here gets added to the form. And it's the same with the rest of the fields. We just have to separate all of the URL variables with ampersands. So we can type and phone equals 555-123-4567. Now we have these two fields, first name and project details. Variables have to be one word, but both of these are two words, so how do we combine them? Well, in the case of first name, because it's a standard form field, we just remove the space, so we can type and first name equals Ben. Then, because project details is a custom field, we don't remove the space, we replace it with an underscore, so we can add and project underscore details equals, these are some details about the project. You'll notice I left spaces in this URL variable's value, which in modern browsers is fine because they will automatically convert them to a URL encoded string when we hit enter. But you'll notice what the spaces are replaced with in the URL is %20. It's not something you really need to worry about, but there you go. Now, when is all this going to be useful to you? Well, let's go back to the form builder and take a look at another custom field type, the hidden field. One thing that may be valuable to know is the contact source when they join your list. For instance, maybe you linked to this form from a Facebook post and you want to know how many people came from that post and completed this form. So we'll create a hidden source field and then add it anywhere on our form. It's hidden, so it won't actually show up. Now, if we go back to view the form, we can remove all these other form variables and just say source equals FB post 1. Then, this is the link you would use in your first Facebook post. Then you could change this to FB post 2 for your second Facebook post, or IG bio to track what people came through your Instagram bio. You can use this link anywhere, and the value of source can be whatever you want. So now back in the editor, I'm actually going to get rid of this project details field because in the automation I set up, we start with a basic form just to get their name and email. Then we follow up with a more detailed form asking for more information about their project. So project details will go in our second form. Now I'll move over to the style tab in the sidebar. Whether you want the layout to be horizontal or vertical is obviously up to you. You can change the background color, or you could just make it transparent if you're going to be embedding it on your website and want to style the background there. Font color is similarly self-explanatory, as is font. Most of these you can just play around with for a minute and get the hang of. So we'll just take a quick look at border and corner radius and max width. And if we scroll down, it's the same for styling the button. Just play around with it until it looks the way you want. Custom CSS will let you really take control of all the details of the styling, but this isn't a CSS tutorial, so you can ignore this section if you don't know anything about CSS. But it's super easy to learn, so if you want a tiny introduction, here's how you use the custom CSS field. First, we click to enable the inspector. Then, when we hover over the form, we see all the elements' classes and types. If we click on one of them, like the button, it adds the selector into the field here so that we can start adding some styles, such as setting the width to 100%. Now let's say we want to update all the input fields. If we enable the inspector, we can see that they all have different classes, but they are all input fields, so we can select one, remove the class, and now we can style all the input fields together. Let's just say font weight is bold. That's all we'll do for now. If you're familiar with CSS, you should be able to go from here, and if you know nothing about CSS, hopefully it wasn't too boring. The last thing on this tab is the ability to disable the ActiveCampaign branding, and now we can move on to options. When the form is submitted, right now, we just show the thank you message. This is fine, you can customize it here, but the better thing to do, in my opinion, is build a whole thank you page. Then you can change this to open URL, and paste the link here, and they'll get redirected to your thank you page after submitting this form. We set these form options when we first created the form, but now we can edit them here. For instance, we could add a tag like consultation requested, but for now, I'm just going to leave things as is. The one thing I will do is click this gear next to main list and disable the opt-in confirmation requirement. If you leave this enabled, after the contact submits the form, they'll first get an email asking if they really want to subscribe to your list before you're able to send them any of the things they're expecting from you. So instead of making them jump through an extra hoop, we can just disable it and click save. Now here under advanced, I'm going to uncheck allow blank fields to overwrite existing field data. In this case, let's imagine the person completing this form is already an ActiveCampaign contact of ours, and we collected their phone number previously. If we leave this checked and they choose not to add their phone number to this form, the blank field will overwrite their existing phone number, basically just deleting it. Not great, so we're leaving it unchecked. If we click this trigger automation, it will create a new automation from scratch, with the trigger being the submission of this particular form. We're not going to worry about that now because we already went over creating an automation from scratch and using the submission of this form as the trigger in our ActiveCampaign automations tutorial. So for now, we'll just click integrate again. If you want to add this form to your own website, you have a few options. If your site is built on WordPress, I highly recommend the ActiveCampaign WordPress plugin because it makes embedding forms plus things like site tracking and conversations super easy to set up. I'll create a separate tutorial all about the ActiveCampaign WordPress plugin, but for now you should be able to follow along with the steps they present here because it is pretty straightforward to set up. Otherwise, we can go back to embed and you have two options for embedding this form. For most people, I recommend the simple embed because if you edit the form in the future, it will update automatically on your site. But if you're a much more advanced user and you want to use JavaScript to listen to form events or maybe just customize the CSS more without having to come back into the ActiveCampaign form editor, then the full embed is what you'll want to go with. We already looked at just linking directly to the form. It's not the best practice, but you can definitely use it. And finally is the option to add the form to your Facebook page. It's also very easy to set up, so just click Get Started here and it'll walk you through it. Now, if we save and exit, you'll see it's added to our list of forms. You can click here to add a label, and in this dropdown, you'll see a few options such as statistics, which you can use to see how well your form is performing. And that's it for this video. Again, if you already have an ActiveCampaign account, you can get Jumbo Jetpack's premium membership for free, which unlocks an entire ActiveCampaign tutorial course, our premium support that you can reach out to anytime, and our growing collection of pre-built core automations and core demos with videos explaining not just how to set each of them up, but also how you can customize them to fit your business's particular needs. So if you already have an ActiveCampaign account and you want to get free access to everything I just mentioned, head to jumbojetpack.com/free to learn more. The link is below.